What story do you really want to tell but no one has asked? The right question for you to bring it up? A few years ago I was working at a pretty miserable place. When I got off work it had begun to rain and I had no umbrella. The crosswalk was red and there wasn't any shelter from the rain nearby, so I just stood there getting soaked, desperately wishing I could be home. A couple of drunk middle-aged dudes came up waiting to cross the street. I didn't look them in case they got rowdy, but one of the men looked at me and handed me his umbrella. I tried to refuse but he said, "Your head is more precious than mine." Then the light turned green and he stumbled along sharing his friend's umbrella. It was a simple and incredibly kind gesture that made me feel like I mattered. I still have the umbrella and I, 11, never forget the moment a drunk old man cheered me up during a dark time. I also hope he didn't regret losing the umbrella after he sobered up. It was a really nice one. Edit. Got some questions asking where and it was in Korea. P. My grandmother's house had a row of peony bushes in the landscaping. They were in full bloom, deep pink and white, and you could smell them across the yard. My grandma was busy hanging sheets on the clothesline. The peonies smelled so tempting that 6-year-old me just couldn't resist. I walked over to the peonies. My grandma yelled not to pick them, and I leaned over and took a big exaggerated whiff. I felt something that can only be described as what it would feel like if bugs were crawling all over my nose and throat and getting into my mouth. Because they were. The peony I smelled so deeply was covered in ants. What must have been 59 ants flew up my nose and down my throat. So now, I hate the smell of peonies. This is a story from a through hike I went on this past summer. I was over 3 weeks into a month-long hike and I was starting to have major motivation problems. It was a rainy day and I decided fuck it. I'm not going to wear any rain gear because you just get hot in addition to being soaked. I climbed to the top of a lookout point and met a man with his 2 teenage children. He's super funny and nice and we hit it off and chat for a bit. He asks me about what I'm eating and how my hike is going. After weeks of being mostly solo most of the time, it's so good to talk with a good conversation partner. But it's storming and we're high up so we shortly part ways. Anyways, the next day of my hike is brutal. My gear is still damp and my body was not holding up as well as I hoped. I'm fatigued to my core. And I want to be done. But I'm determined to go 15 miles anyways. Cone of my longer days. Mile 11 to 13 are a beach walk portion. I thought great. That'll be fun. Absolutely not. Walking through tiny beach rocks in hiking boots with a 40-pound back is hard as fuck. I dumped a full cup of rocks out of my shoes afterwards. I get to the end of the walk and there's a little bridge leading back towards the woods. On the bridge there's a sign that says, lowest elevation point of the SHT. SHT being the trail. And I'm thinking to myself, I get it. Today is the worst day. God damn it, SHT. You bitch. You really know how to kick someone when they're already down. So I keep going and I make it to a road crossing with trail signs on either side. And on the near sign, I see a gas station bag full of goodies. In my head, I'm thinking simultaneously no way and that it has to be for me. I get up close to it and in permanent marker, all caps, it says my very uncommon first name. I was speechless. Inside there was a full-sized bag of kettle chips, a 24 ounces Coke, an apple, and an orange. The kindly man I spoke to asked me what food I missed most and how far I was going. I said potato chips and 15 miles. He delivered. Best day on the trail. I don't usually drink pop, but that Coke, still a little cold, was maybe the best thing I ever tasted. TLSDRI was having a really bad stretch of days on a through hike, and a kind stranger gave me an amazing, surprising gift and made my day. My great-grandfather lived in Kansas when the Dust Bowl hit the U.S. He and his wife lived in a really small town, and he owned the grocery store. After he passed away, my family was going through the stuff in his house and found a box of letters he had hidden from everyone. Every letter was a thank you from different families he helped during the Dust Bowl. People would be running from the Dust Bowl and pass through his town. He would give them free food to last them until they reached their destinations. Many of the letters thanked him for saving their lives and stuff like that. He took this secret to the grave, literally. Not even his wife knew. I've heard mention that maybe she wouldn't have been quite as pleased, but I don't know about that. I just think that's super cool, and I'm very proud of him. Have a lot of weird stories about my family that I never get to tell, haha. Edit. I didn't realize people would be so interesting in this, haha. Kind of thought it was just a personal family pride thing. Thank you all for your ideas regarding preserving these memories. I will absolutely look into that. I'll have to touch base with my dad and see if we know who ended up with those letters. Most of my other stories are my grandpa being a dumb teenager in rural Kansas, and think about how I would have never gotten away with that stuff, haha. 1'11" have to talk to my dad and see if he has any other stories about my great-grandpa. The town is in northern Kansas. I'm pretty sure the population is under 590 people, and they have a town museum, which is adorable. I've been there once. Literally has some grammar mistakes. Thank you everyone for explaining what the Dust Bowl is. Look up pictures. It's crazy. Once when I lived in Japan, I was riding my bike across a rice field at about 6 a.m. The sun was coming up and there was no one anywhere. S0 rare in Japan. Just me on a dirt road between rice fields for miles and miles, and the sound of my bike. Then I heard a saxophone as I kept riding. Eventually I saw a man sitting on a stool practicing his saxophone just on the road between rice fields. He nodded a hello to me without breaking play at all. One of the most magical moments of my life. When me and my slightly older cousins were kids, they'd try to convince me of falsehoods all the time. I was, and still kind of am, extremely gullible. I fell for, hey, gullible is on the ceiling more than once. One day when I was around 11, the elder of my cousins was talking about how he was joining a lacrosse team. I had no idea what that was, so I asked him. He explained the rules and the tools of the game. I was certain that he was lying to me, that it was another prank. There was no fucking way people ran around with small baskets on sticks, throwing and catching hard balls. That's insanity. So I smirked, said, "Suor," and went on my way. For the next several years, whenever someone mentioned lacrosse, I'd snicker, thinking I was privy to a joke. When I was around 17, a friend of mine mentioned that she was going to a lacrosse game. I laughed and said, kind of annoyed, "Yeah, I know the joke, you can drop it. Lacrosse isn't real." She was so confused and looked at me like I was crazy. She insisted it was in fact real. I insisted it wasn't. We looked it up online, sure enough. Completely real. I was utterly shocked, and way more than a little embarrassed. Especially when I thought back to all of my weird responses to mentions of lacrosse. Ugh. Edit. Holy crap, y'all. Thanks for the awards. My dad was friends with a crow that lived at his workplace for a few years while we lived in Bosnia. And one day Po, as my dad named him, came up to him and started showing my dad that he couldn't fly properly. Like really exaggerating how he couldn't fly. So my dad picked him up and put him in an open box and took him home to me and my mom. Po lived with us for a few days and acted like he's been with people his whole life. Even though he was clearly a wild crow. He ate from our hands and would hang out with us on the patio. And he even let me hold him, which was surprising, given I was about 3 at the time. Bosnia doesn't have a lot of air conditioning, so we always had the sliding door to the patio open. So it's not like Po was trapped. After maybe 3 days he decided he was feeling better and flew off after catching our attention to let us know he was going. My dad never saw him again since we lived around 10 miles away from where my dad worked, and I guess he never made it back. Still, was a very cool experience to have a pet crow for a few days. Edit. I know it's #cringe to add on like this, but fucking rip to my inbox and thanks for the awards. One time when my son was about 4, he ran into the bathroom right as I was stepping out of the shower. He looked down at my junk, held his nose down and said, "Haha. Squidward. Honk honk." The dream I had a while ago that made me laugh so hard I woke up. My best friend invites me over to meet his new pet cats. The first few ones are perfectly fine. Then he brings out the last one, long-haired, patterned on top and white underneath, and warns me, "This one's kind of stupid." So I had to write his name on him. The last cat is very friendly, and immediately rolls over so I can pet his belly. Written on it, in sloppy black Sharpie, is Kevin. Edit. Boyfriend and I have been joking that my subconscious self is much funnier than my conscious self. I've never been awarded for telling a funny real-life story before. So I guess we're right. Thank you. Apparently I talk really clearly in my sleep. I had my closest friend sleepover one day in my late teens. According to her, in the middle of the night I sat straight up in bed with my eyes open and glanced out my bedroom window. Then I turned to her, put my fingers over her lips and whispered, "Shish. They coming." I don't remember any of this, but she said she couldn't fall back asleep all night. I also told my boyfriend in my sleep once that he had giraffe arms, giraffe legs and no heart, because I guess I was mad at him in my sleep. I don't ever remember what I said. I talk almost every night according to my partner. In grad school, I dueled one of my professors with foils for an A in his class and won. Work at a movie theater concession. This is the story about my best shift so far. It was opening night for Spider-Man Far From Home, which also happened to be on a Tuesday. Cheap ticket night. Nay also had plenty of showtimes for Avengers Endgame, so we knew it was going to be fucking nuts. Nay popped extra popcorn, stocked up cups and candy, had extra staff scheduled, and even the managers were ready to come help us. NDI was on the main till that guests line up. 2. An hour into my shift, the rush begins. Lineups all the way to the door. Everyone's rushing to fill orders, and I'm working my ass off with the biggest lineup. There's popcorn all over the floor, and I knew that cleanup afterwards was going to be a pain in the ass. Then something happened that just brightened my day. Just as the rush was dying down, Spider-Man and his girlfriend, not MJ, come up to my till and order. The guy had a full-blown Spider-Man costume for opening night. His girlfriend seemed like she just didn't want to be there, and he was just so hyped for the movie. It was honestly hilarious. I served them their food and drinks, and gave him free butter. Say I liked his costume and told them to enjoy the movie. But it gets better. Another guy came in with an Iron Spider costume, the suit from Infinity War, but without the golden claws. Came in, but didn't order anything from concession. As I was cleaning up, I saw the guy in the Spider-Man costume go up to the Iron Spider costume and they were like, You dressed up too? Awesome, man. And they acted like best friends even though they didn't even know each other. Later in the night, a group of guests were leaving the building, and I saw the two guys in costume chatting away like mad about the movie. The guy's girlfriend was just following behind them, and he didn't even acknowledge her. It was hilarious. Edit. Holy fuck, my first awards. When I was like 6 my dad taught me how to grab ants with the tip of my fingers in a way that the ant couldn't bite me and I wouldn't hurt it. I'm talking about those big red leafcutter ants. In my country we call them bachicos. Now, in my school's playground, there were a lot of these ants. I taught my friends how to grab them with the fingertips technique and we would spend all our recess time playing with ants. Eventually, as we were evil little curious kids, we found out that if we plucked out their antennas, they wouldn't recognize each other and would fight to death. Knowing this, we would spend our day looking for the best battle ants we could find to make them kill each other for our entertainment. It was only a matter of time until we began making bets. We also started selling each other the best warriors and more kids joined the business. We didn't know that we were doing something wrong, but we kept it a secret from our teachers only because they wouldn't let us play with insects. The place where we kept our fighters and the bowl we used as our coliseum received the name of Bachicolandia, which translates to something like Antland. One day a kid found a really big ant and sold it to another kid for like 3 times the price of a regular ant. When the big moment came, the big ant turned out to be a really bad fighter and got its head cut off by a normal size ant. The kid said that he got scammed and wanted his money back, so they started fighting. This got our teacher involved, and she was horrified when she found out what we were doing. And that was the end of Bachicolandia. TLSDR. As a kid, I started an ant fighting ring in my school's playground. I actually posted it on another AskReddit thread, but it got buried. 'Twas at a party a while ago and I went to use the bathroom, which I thought was unoccupied. I walk in and then notice that there is this guy sitting in the bathtub with a rotisserie chicken. He sticks up a finger gesturing for me to wait a second while he finishes chewing and then says, "Don't mind me. I've seen a lot of random things at parties but for some reason that one always cracks me up so much. I often wonder what became of Chicken Dude. Swear to God this happened last night. I woke up and was chilling on my phone for 1 minutes. I felt something in my throat so I started trying to cough it out. After a few minutes I cough out 2 pieces into my hand. One of them was those tiny little white balls that form in her throat and smell pretty bad. I forget the name, but the other one was about the size of a penny and some old food or something, I think. Here's the thing. I pick up the bigger one and it falls underneath my hand, so I go to pick it up again and it's fucking gone. Vanished straight into thin air. Both of them. My hand was only like 2 inches above my bed, so I'm looking around the area and I don't see it at all. Then I fucking feel something in my throat and swear to God cough out both pieces. Exactly the same way. I went and put them in a cup and in the morning they were both there. Let's say the first one was my imagination. It's still fucking weird that I imagined exactly what I was about to cough out. So fucking weird, man. Edit. Yes, tonsil stones, thank you. My sister has Zoom calls with her half homeschool half public school class and I was too lazy to move, so I promised I'd be quiet on the couch when she started. 30 minutes later I farted really loudly. She then proceeded to yell, "I am not muted." You'd think this was the end of it. But alas, it was not. The next day her teacher goes over online etiquette and specifically says, make sure it's quiet, no distractions or siblings farting in the background. I posted this before a few times, but I'll post it again. Working at a buffet. Put out a new lasagna. Like a 14 by 10 pan or something like that. Man, IHO had been standing there. Spent the next 5 minutes taking every last bit of the top layer of cheese off of said pan. No noodles. No layers. Just the top cheese layer. Not only that, there was a person behind him. Proceeded to take his slab of cheese to add a cheese crust over the top of his mound of food. To seal the deal, I could not believe what I was seeing. I was watching him the entire time and someone was behind him watching, too. We were both in shock, lol. Finally, I've been waiting to tell this one. When I was about 12 or so, my family went to Utah Olympic Park and we did all the cope courses and stuff. One of the things we did was a zip line that led to a tower that you then bungee jumped off of. I met the height requirements for it, but as I found out halfway through, I didn't weigh enough to make it all the way there. So for a good 10 minutes I was stuck halfway across the zip line. I wasn't scared, just a little annoyed. But then I noticed my mom down below with her phone out taking a video. Her son was stuck a couple 100 feet in the air and all she did was take a video. Anyways, after a bit an employee zipped over and pushed me the rest of the way over. The bungee jump was pretty fun. And thankfully I weighed enough that the staffer at the bottom could unlatch me from my harness. My parents tell this story often. Apparently, I used to be a really creepy kid. Sometimes before I would go to sleep, around age 5 to 7, I'd look out the window and just watch. When asked what I was looking at, I'd reply saying it was a monster. When asked the monster's name, I would say, look at me, in a creepy sort of way. Also sometimes I would just violently shake. And if my parents asked why, I would just say, I can't stop. It won't let me. Quote. Last year, me and my parents went out to a steakhouse for my dad's birthday. Because it was his birthday, Mum was driving us home so she couldn't drink that night. I was only 15 so I couldn't either. This meant that my dad, throughout the night, drank an entire bottle of wine to himself. And he is a bit of a lighthead when it comes to wine. We were just sat quietly eating when Dad started staring at the abstract picture of a smiling cow. I asked him what he was doing and in the happiest voice I'd ever fucking heard him use, he goes, such a happy cow. And then on the way home, we stopped in Tesco for a cake and Mum's petrol light came on with a little ding. Dad copied the noise and then laughed as if he'd just done the funniest thing on the planet and was laughing for the rest of the 10-minute journey home. This might not be as funny as I think it is, but it was fucking hilarious at the time.